Hey guys, welcome back to another video. It's been quite some time. Been busy doing Twitch videos, Twitch streaming. So if you want to ever jump on board and join us on Twitch, I am accepting challenges as well sometimes. So possibly I might make a Friday night or a Saturday night an ongoing thing where we can challenge other people. So that'll definitely be up for it. In this game, one of the followers challenged me. I beat him 5-1. I'm not here to boast though. I've picked the best game that I won, and also picked another game the game that I did lose as well. And I'm going to talk about how I lost it as well. The first game's a bit of a boast because this gives a really good example of how we're just opening up here. Just how middle games, how it turns out, what you're trying to plan for in the Italian game. So this is the Italian game. And this is like the piano. This is like when the black starts mirroring white, it turns into the Greco piano. It's quite a boring opening, really. This is actually a good move to attack the bishop. The bishop's unprotected, so it's not a bad move. So at the retreat, he goes for the double up the pawns, which is fine. We get an open rook here as well. So that's actually to get the double of the pawns, but generally it's a bad thing, but we can definitely utilize the open position as well. Okay, let me know how you guys going in the comments as well. Tell me about your chess journey as well, and what have you improved on? What do you think you haven't improved on? What are your goals? What do you look to do next? And what do you want me to cover as well? So this last week on the Twitch stream, I've been starting to focus on pawn breaks, and how to utilize it. And the reason you can utilize it is you could usually helps to say a pawn break here, definitely, and you move here, and then all of a sudden this file becomes open. And pawn breaks can also help the long diagonal bishops as well, or just any diagonals, so not just files, and that's how it works. So I move the bishop to target the bishop, and they're looking to do a pawn break here as well, but just not in the sense of using the pawn as the aggressor, using the bishop. So if he trades, we did. Could have actually done it here and then have the open file towards the king, but I didn't choose to do that. But that's definitely one we could have done and got a pawn break and then have an advantage in front of the opponent's king as well. So something you can look at. So that's something I've been working on this week, and this game is probably about a couple of days old as well. I'm moving the knight towards the king as well, so just starting to move towards the black king. This is a powerful square for the knight, so if you have a look, this is a strong outpost. The reason why knights are very strong with the outpost is because there's not many pieces apart from the pawns that can take the knight off its spot. So not many people will trade your knight for your bishops. You can probably trade a bad bishop for a very strong knight though. And in closed games, knights are stronger too, so just bear in mind with that. So now he's got like a funny position here. The difference is he's sort of like mirroring us with the knight. We can kick him off and he can kick us off. So it's pretty interesting here. And then we've got this knight as well, heading towards here as well. So that'd be a good spot. So we're going to kick the knight off first. He could have actually done the same thing as well. He goes back, always retreat. That's a good principle as well. And then we moved across to the G file, just pinning down the pin against the king. Just putting some extra pressure on. And now we're thinking about moving here as well, and then putting pressure here. This is what made our opponent's retreat square really good. He could have actually retreated here. And I'm actually retreating back here. He could have retreated back here, but instead he retreated here. So he goes to attack the knight. So I retreat. And he attacks this square. So you're going to be careful of this square because it could be checked. This square is good because we're defending the knight. And even if the bishop takes, we're still controlling this square. And we're eyeing down in front of the king as well. So now he attacks this square as well, so defends this square. And then we've really got a strong attack here, just building up the pressure. This is another thing too I've learned over the course of probably a week or two, is when you're looking at this position, have a think about it, and think about what else can you do in this position. So a natural reaction to, I've seen many people do, I've been watching streamers as well, all different ratings, and the natural reaction is to start blundering all your pieces and start moving across here. And then I did learn that, instead of just going for the checkmate, you can actually go for an advantage. So you can actually play to win. So you can probably, win 1 or 2 pawns out of this, or to at least get his rook. So if you can't checkmate him, at least try and get his rook. So instead of just going and pushing everything too forward, and you blow your position, because many of us have done that in the past. I know that probably some of you that watching this right now would have done that. You would have known when you're up in a situation where you could have checkmated him, and it all went horribly wrong because you went too early with the attack, or you actually expected too much, or you think there was an attack there or a checkmate there, but there was nothing there at all. So yeah, so just moving forward. So he moves his knight, protecting the square as the pawn as well. So just after you've thought about the position a bit, what else comes to mind? So not blundering all your pieces, hopefully, is not the case. We've got these guys going. What else is on the board that can help you? So another thing too is there's this idea of just possibly bringing the knight. So something bringing the pawn down the board. So something so small, such as the pawn, can actually be enough to overwhelm the position. So could you imagine if the pawn was here? What would happen with the knight? So the knight's sort of trapped here to go here. And it's just mainly to block this spot and then get it off this pawn as well. We could also do it with the knight as well, which is what we did. And now he's moved back, so he's eyeing down this spot. And the problem with this square is, if the queen isn't defending this spot, he can go into check here, and he can get our rook as well. So there's a lot of threats here. So just because he's got the one knight out doesn't mean we can't lose material and lose the advantage. Okay, so we move our knight in front, just trying to advance our knight. Hopefully he can move his pawn down, just trying to weaken his structure. So he brings his knight back. So he's going for perpetual check, and now we go, this is when we brought the pawn down. So he brings the queen. So this actually pins the knight to the queen. So this is actually another brilliant move by our opponent. This was a very tough game. So I should have been looking like an easy game here, but it was definitely not an easy game at all. Our opponent was playing really good. Did eat up a lot of time at the moment. So we had that advantage, but we also had the aggression as well. So now we're moving up to the knight. So there's only 2 squares, or he's got 3 retreats he could go to. He could even go here again. You can also think about being in this position as well. Where is the best spot for that knight could be? So you could think about, so retreat squares are just as important as attacking squares, and sometimes retreat squares can be a lot better as well. So, to maintain the tension or get rid of the tension, you can definitely move your knight back. So even moving it here, maybe to attack the knight, all of a sudden, if the queen wasn't here, they somehow remove the queen. Move this here, and somehow here, and then all of a sudden they traded knights. Queen takes a pawn. His pawn ends up being here as well, putting pressure on. You never know. It could be up in material. So he moves it this way again. And something you could be aware of too, just because they do the same position more than 3 times, it's going to be a repetition. And whether or not a draw can happen, not just over 3 times. It can, if it's the same position, it happens 3 times, but not in a consecutive move order, it can still be a draw. So just keep that in mind as well. So this was a good move, putting him in check, and we also get the rook as well. And looking at this position too, just remember how strong the pin is. The pin is as well. So one of the best things he probably could have done was probably retreat. So as soon as you see the pin, retreat. And I've actually seen some of the better players, as soon as a rook comes here or a queen comes here, they instantly move their king out of the pin straight away. And they just do preparation right before any of this happens. And that's why they seem to be 1 or 2 moves ahead, because they actually can prepare for the situation way before it actually happens. So they actually see the pattern. So now we can just take the rook. So this is the advantage we get. It's not necessarily a checkmate, but we got an advantage. And this is like the moral of this video. So now we're attacking the knight. So we could actually... This was probably a mistake on my part, because now we've got an open file here as well. And we just gave up material. So we gave up the pawn. Underestimated the queen being there as well. So never be too comfortable in your position, because you'll do mistakes. Okay, so we're moving the pawn. Hopefully it's to put my knight forward and then gain another attacker as well. So bring across the rook. Because if you've got some attacking, you can always bring more. And he brings back, ready for the other attack as well. He also has this attack here. So he actually could have attacked queen side and looked for some counterplay as well. And maybe even push down the pawns. And just really utilise this weakness as well. But because I was too busy up here, he was over defending this area. Rightfully so as well. So bringing it down here and starting to put pressure on the undefended pawn. So this is a huge weakness now. And he removes the weakness. So this is actually really strong now. And notice how the king is not here, or as the king's not here pinning the pawn. So it's actually quite strong here now. So I have to retreat. And he moves the king across there to safety. Probably ideas of putting the rook across. But just remember, when you're in this situation as well, there's more than one side of the board as well. So this is my weakness here. All my pieces are here. But have a look how this could be a weakness here. This doesn't look strong. It doesn't take long for someone to actually come down and put pressure on here. And then here. And then even do a pawn break here and trade here somehow. And get the rook involved. And then you got some counterplay. And then my rook and queen and rook look very, very bad here. Especially trapped behind all these pawns. And probably not doing anything at this stage now. So we challenged. So because the king moved across the board, we're trying to do pawn breaks and trying to open up the center, because we really want to try and open up here and start attacking. Our king currently is quite safe, but our opponent's king is getting towards the center. So it was a bit safer over here, but now it's moving across and he's going into danger. And we want to exploit that as well. So our opponent actually did see that move eventually, and he did see the weakness. So this is a really good move for our opponent. Just means we can't be too relaxed. And then we took another pawn and just trying to open up the center. And now we've opened up, and this was a pawn break that we achieved. We did sacrifice 2 pawns for this situation. So we moved across, and now we've trapped the king. So the idea of the file, if you have a rook, the king can't cross here. So we've actually trapped him in, and can't cross across here either. So we've trapped the king this way as well. So just to give you an idea if he can control the board. Okay, so he's come back, and now it's just trying to exchange. This rook's not doing much. His queen was the only thing doing anything. Back here, my queen was doing a lot. But ever since the rook come across, the queen wasn't really doing anything then. So we traded an active piece for a non-active piece. So that's what you like to do. So he trades. And now we've got double rooks. So this is very strong. Goes to attack. Something you've got to be aware of when you have double rooks as well is just be careful. These squares here where the knight can go, especially when you're up against the knight, These squares can be very deadly because it ends up forks. So that's another thing I've been looking at this week. It's been looking at wherever the knights can go and what attacks they can put against your structure. So he moves his king down the board. So towards the end game, you want your king to be very active. So this is some pawn moves. And now just trying to put some pressure on the backwards pawn. So this is a backwards pawn and it's undefended. And this is a total weakness. And this is one way to exploit it. So this was actually a blunder going forward. But he doesn't have to. He can go back to defend it. So now we can attack and just exploit this weakness more. And at the same time, it was a weakness because now if you have a look at his pawn structure, he's got 3 islands now. Okay, so if you look back here, very, very strong pawn structure. And this sort of understands you why certain moves can actually upset your structure. So sometimes you could think, and people will say, oh, that's a blunder, but you don't understand why something's a blunder until it's actually explained to you. See, when you watch the Grandmasters, they play so fast, and they say, oh, it's just, you know, he's just ruined his structure. But if you play it a little bit slower, you can actually see what really happens. So this is a pawn break right here. This is what we're aiming for. And then this just was the nail in the coffin and pushed the king back. Actually exploited this pawn. And the king's tied down here. Couldn't help defend here. And we just take. And then these pawn structures definitely down. And now this one's very weak. So we could easily come back here and attack. So we come towards here. And this is another weak point to the with his pawn. So if he goes down here, we could take, create another isolated pawn, and also create an open file as well. Okay, so now we've got an open file. So it wasn't this one because the knight is defending the pawn, but we've got another open file. And this is what we were achieving early in the game. As soon as we lost the attack, we got the advantage on the king side before with our big attack, and that was our goal. But once that we got our... So it wasn't always checkmate your current goal. It was actually get an advantage. So that's the second best thing. And the third thing is the new plan. And the new plan was to open up the center to create new threats to the king. And this is what we did. So he ran away. And now I'm just... Towards the end game, you just want to try and create as much weaknesses to your opponent as possible. And try and collect as many pawns as you can. And then... Once this is taken, this is a pass pawn. And the idea in the end game is to promote your pawns. Okay, so we're sacrificing this pawn. We could have traded there and not been too worried. But we ran away. And now he's got a pass pawn, so this is very deadly for us. So we check. We notice that it's a bad situation here. Notice this is actually a blunder in a sense. He could have went back here too, which would have been worse. There's not much he could have done in this situation. Probably blocking would have been the best bet. And then we traded. And then he could continue moving his pawn down. Notice the knight is on this square as well. This is a very important square for the knight to be on. It's defending that. So that's what I meant. When I saw the pass pawn, I knew I had to move immediately, and my time was running out. Didn't probably have time to even go here. As soon as I went here, the next move, it would have went here, and then it could have been easily 2 moves to be over, pretty much. Because once he does the early checks and he's got a queen on the board with a rook, yeah, and I'm in the corner as well with no protection there, definitely wouldn't have taken long. I did the second best thing, and that's remove the defender from this square. And then easily, notice the rook is defending the king coming across as well. So my king is trapped in the corner. But now his king is being checkmated as well as getting rid of the defender for the E1 square. So he retreats, and we just take. He does the second best thing here. Just trying to push my king away. and trying to get momentum, and also another defender. So now I have to run away, and also he can move the pawn down. Probably the worst thing I could have done was move here as well. So once he moves here, he could have moved here and checked me once I was down here. And then definitely he would have promoted. So I had to really play sharp and careful. Notice the times on the clock as well. It was 5.6 and 14.7. So this was all in short time now. And he did the blunder. Also a blunder, not a blunder. This was this is probably the only move he had next. Any other move he did would have landed in checkmate because I had both these files. And if he was over here, he had no retreat squares. But he saw the move. So our opponent was still playing well. He was losing this game, but he was actually seeing the moves. And he still created a retreat square. So he ran back. And we still got this threat. So we put pressure on. Notice that now the rook is stuck to this file. So if he moves down here, or it's stuck to the rank, moves down here, we'll simply just take the pawn. Now we just double up the pawn. And then we trade. And then we get a comfortable endgame. So just trying to get our king active, take the pawn. Then it becomes a race between the pawns. And the strong structure he's got here. But the difference is here, we have the initiative. And that's a strong principle at the endgames as well, is the initiative. So there's three things in an endgame. Is the initiative, active king, and passive rooks versus aggressive rooks. So you want your rook to be aggressive, and you want it to avoid being passive, because that can be a losing game. So we can just keep promoting. And sometimes what's happened is you can be so wound up trying to promote your pawn to a queen that you forget about the threats here and you forget the trade and they promote before you. You see, you don't want to do that. So we get the check first. So that was the most important thing. He retreats. Now it's pretty much, I was thinking pretty much here and here, and it'll be game over. And plus, mind you, the pawn is defending that square as well. But we end up getting more material. And our opponent ran and stuck it through to the end. And that was checkmate right there. Almost. Actually, it wasn't checkmate. He resigned in this spot. He still had this square. But the next move would have been here. And then it would have been checkmate. Okay, and this is the last game. This game is the one I lost in. But like I said, that was a very good loss by our opponent. He was seeing moves even though he was losing. Okay, so we didn't open. I've been working very hard as a Sicilian and the King's Indian. It was very funny. I tried doing the two knights defense this time, or the Berlin defense, as they call it. So this is the piano. Usually transpires from... Actually, this is not the piano. They call this the Queen's Pawn Opening Accelerated London System. So the London system is when the pawn lands here. The Italian game is when the pawn is when the bishop is here. Sorry, bishop. And then our bishop ends up going here. That's the piano. But it's not in this case because it's the London system and it's on the other side of the board. Different name. So the Accelerated London System. So we're attacking. We did this last time and we exchanged. But this time it didn't exchange. So he's learnt from his mistake. And now it's become a funny situation here where he's putting pressure here. We have to possibly double up our pawns. And then we can take here as well. So something to bear in mind is, if you do take and create double pawns, you don't mind doubling your pawns towards the center of the board because you control more center of the board. But you've got to be very strategic and careful about it. So he's got a powerful knight in the center. Everything's pretty much, oh, that's my knight, and everything's quite hanging. There's a lot going on here. And this is where I thought, this is where I sort of blundered. And I thought, I sort of lost myself in this position. And if you have a look about this knight doesn't have many retreat squares either. So I started exchanging. But I probably should have started taking with this pawn, with this knight possibly. And then then I realised we've got this right here, and I thought, game on, there's actually an attack here. So he retreats, and then we check again. And now I'm thinking, there might actually be a checkmate here. So we've got a really strong bishop here. We've got a knight here. Bishops could set up here eventually. Definitely looking pretty good. So he does the block. We trade material, and this was like a really blunder. This is where I lost the game pretty much, and our opponent just took full advantage of our blundering. So we continued on, and I lost the game. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to this situation. So as soon as our opponent does this, you should never do this move. This is an F2 to the F3. So what I've been saying all week, when it comes to winning and losing games, it doesn't really matter the outcome. The matter is, if you do a mistake, you need to be held accountable for it. And you're not always going to be held accountable. You actually get rewarded for doing mistakes. And this is why it's so important to analyze your games and notify when you do the mistakes. So my instant trigger was to go here. And we started trading. As soon as this was a mistake, it opened up the file. And you don't want to open up any file towards the king. There is a checkmate here. I actually missed it. I actually should have went in with the queen, sorry. But I went with the knight, as I showed before. So if I actually went in here, the king doesn't have a retreat square here. It's forced to go into the center. And then all of a sudden, the king is in terrible shape. Now we can move our knight back here. And then and then it actually attacks the king twice. And it's actually checkmate, pretty much. Actually, it is checkmate in that position. So that's how quick. And when I knew that position, I knew I missed something. I thought there was a checkmate, but I sent the knight in second, the first, instead of the queen to control more squares. So you've got to actually identify what actually ties down the king a lot more. And it was actually the queen in this situation. Sometimes in basic attacks, the knight's good enough. So I'll go back in the spot and I'll continue the rest of the game. But I actually missed that checkmate. I have to analyze it to find it. So he ran away and we used the knight. So I was actually going after material as well, or thinking he could trade, and we take. But everything's hanging at 2 as well. So this is like an overcommitted attack that we had. But as soon as we lost the attack, we lose the game. So we have to notify, once we're actually all in, we need to follow up and go after the king. And he takes, and all of a sudden we've got 4 pieces and he's still got 5. Okay, so we move up, trying to advance, move the king up in the board, trying to link up the rooks, which is fine. Now he wants to sacrifice stuff. This is a common trick, is what you can do is once you're up in material, you can trade your stuff. Don't want to trade. You only want to trade when you're up in material. So we get checked, and then we start pushing our pawns forward to try and put pressure on his king. He retreats. Now we do trade, so probably a mistake on my behalf. Trading when you're down, it's not a good thing, so don't do that. So run behind. Getting some active pieces now, so I started thinking, if I can get my pieces a lot more active than my opponent, I could be in better shape. There's a decent fork here as well, but like I said, this is trading again. We shouldn't be trading. He does have this square as well. I think at this stage I was thinking if he goes down here, it wastes a move and I could probably get this rook back into the game and keep his pieces out of the game. But he goes for the material, we go for the trade. So he wins that. And then he's trying just to go for my material as well. Now I'm defending everything with my king. Remember, your king's very powerful towards the end. So he doubles up the rooks. We're starting to push pawns. I want to push the king back because in the endgame, kings in the endgame are very strong and very weak, and they can change the course of a game. And you can lose games from a weak king versus an aggressive king. So now he starts attacking. This is a real threat. This is when I knew I was in serious trouble. Even before, when the attack that I failed, I knew I was in trouble when I missed that attack. So putting pressure on, I knew I had to get these pawns moving and somehow try and break through here, and then somehow get my rooks involved. So this was all about pawn breaks. So he maybe probably better off moving my king forward towards his king and then trying to work on this goal here, trying to break up these pawns. And we've got a pawn break, and we've got landing here. So he's just going after our weakness, which is perfectly fine. Notice I should have had my king already here, because he's already lined up here. We could have just simply just went here to defend. We do have this huge weakness as well. This is his two weaknesses as well. So trading, big no-no. Shouldn't have traded. We're just going into a losing endgame, and you don't want to trade pieces. It actually helps simplify the position as well. We're just losing material. And now we're actually exploiting his weakness. Unfortunately, we didn't have a piece here to help attack. Yeah, got a rook on an open file. Now he's got a serious pass pawn happening. It's pretty dangerous. Now put pressure on. But now our rook is totally tied down to this pawn. And what did I say just before? So active rooks are more important than passive rooks, defensive rooks. So this is like a defensive, and my rook's can't do anything. It's tied down. This is actually a very active rook. It can go up here to check, and can go over here, can go everywhere. It's not tied down. So he's freeing up his rook now. He had it freed. Now it's defending here with the bishop. And now he can just simply run away. We can trade material now. And it's something we don't want to do, but he was one way from queening. One tile away. And he just eats up the rest of the material. And I was in this position, I resigned, because I've been in this position a few times towards the end game. And he's got a rook, and he's got 3 pawns. We've got a terrible structure. Notice we can't even get the king active in there. We're just sitting to wait for getting checkmated. There's really no stalemate either. Maybe if there was a pawn here. There's some pawns in an endgame that are easier to draw a game with. But yeah, we had no 1 pawn disadvantage. So if there's only 1 pawn disadvantage, you could possibly have a draw. But yeah, we're down a rook. We're -6 at this stage, so there was no point. And yeah, anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. And I'll still try and do a lot more videos on YouTube as well. Plenty more videos coming, and I'm definitely looking at new principles as well. So this is more of a few principles of the end game and also the middle game. So remember, just to go over the principles, that if I can remember them, active kings in the end game, aggressive rooks opposed to defensive rooks in the end game, pawn breaks as well. So just to try, and just remember also to use all your pieces. So even the pawns can be a breaking point towards an attack as well. Don't always go for the sacrifices. Don't always go for the checkmates when there's no checkmates. So go for the advantage as well. Okay, and realize when you're overcommitted. Okay, I know that's a lot of stuff to work on, but yeah, okay. Remember, I'm going to be doing Twitch videos from 7 PM nightly. That's the goal anyway. Okay, guys, and I'll be taking challenges up on some nights as well. And also feel free when you're on Twitch as well. You can chat to me as well, and I can reply to you straight away. And it can always be fun. Okay, guys. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. See ya.